Hello and welcome to So Hear Me Out, a podcast from London's Southbank Centre about classical music and the big questions it can help us explore.
I'm Linton Stevens, musician, broadcaster and illustrator.
And I'm Gillian Moore, broadcaster, writer and artistic associate here at Southbank Centre.
Each episode, we start with a question, something that opens the door into the music. And we each bring one piece to the table that we think speaks to that question.
Sometimes it's something well known, sometimes a piece that deserves more love, but always something that makes us feel or think differently.
And there's a piano in the room, so if we want to show anything, I'm going to invite Gillian to demonstrate for us.
Yeah, this isn't just a history lesson, it's about why the music still hits, what makes it powerful, and what it says to us now.
And today's question, Gillian, well, it's a pretty big one. Why does classical music make us happy?
I'll be bringing a piece written by a 16-year-old bursting with brilliance. It's full of light and energy and invention. The second movement was even the inspiration for his famous fairy-like Midsummer Night's Dream music. It's like joy running wild. Felix Mendelssohn's Octet in E-flat.
And later in the episode, I'll be sharing a piece of music that's bold, hypnotic, and written by one of the first women in Europe to earn a living as a composer. It's driven by a repeating bass line that keeps everything moving, rhythmically alive, and impossible to sit still to. It's Francesca Caccini's Chaconne.
These are pieces that go way beyond the concert hall. They radiate joy from very different times and places and still feel fresh today.
So whether classical music is your thing or you're just curious about what it can do,
join us as we delve into some great music together.
This is episode 6. Why does classical music make us happy?
So Linton, on the subject of music and joy, I just think about a concert that left me beaming and literally jumping for joy. Just a few years back, it was when Nile Rodgers was heading Meltdown Festival at Southbank, and he brought his band Chic to the Royal Festival Hall, and I got all my pals together, all ladies of a certain age, who had enjoyed this music when it first came out, and we were just jumping up and down for about 3 hours.
I have got a story, a claim to fame with Nile Rodgers. So a couple of years ago, an event, Nile Rodgers was performing. It was quite a low stage. It was an very exclusive event, so we could get quite close. And there was a point in the performance, Nile Rodgers' performance, where he was pulling people up on stage. And I'd gone to get a drink, so I came back and I was devastated because I'd just missed it. And he saw the disappointment in my face and he pulled me on stage next to him to dance.
Well, actually, I think I can maybe go even better than that. Because we had Nile around the building for, some time when he was directing Meltdown. And he and I had an amazing conversation about Beethoven's 7th Symphony, all to do with the rhythm.
My favourite Beethoven symphony, by the way.
And talking about that, dance movement about, which is so rhythmically ambiguous. And of course, rhythm and like a really sophisticated approach to rhythm is what Nile Rodgers and Chic and all the other stuff he's done with Bowie and all these other artists. That's what he's all about. So we had a great conversation about that. And then afterwards, at an event where he was talking to the whole staff, he just pointed me out in the crowd of adoring staff, and he said, "And this is my coolest new friend, and we talk about Beethoven together."
Okay, all right, Gillian, you win. You do win. That is a pretty cool introduction.
So just thinking about that gig with Nile Rodgers and Chic and all the joy that there was in that room in the Royal Festival Hall, 2,500 people, and all the joy on the stage as well. It just made me think about all the classical music that brings me joy. And I didn't know where to start because there's so much of it, but I decided to go to almost exactly 200 years ago to the music of Felix Mendelssohn. Now, he is the composer who wrote some quite well-known tunes. He wrote, for example, this.
So
the wedding march.
Yeah, what should be played on the happiest day of your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not very badly on a Casio keyboard, mind me, but never mind. I'm sure it has been played in all sorts of ways. He also wrote this, which might be familiar to people. The great Victorian hymn. Hark.
I did not know that was Mendelssohn.
He did. Actually, not a lot of people know that, as the man said, but he wrote that hymn, Hark the Herald Angels Sing. And he also wrote probably the most popular violin concerto there is, and something called the Hebrides Overture, also known as Fingal's Cave. And these two pieces are kind of never far from, the classic FM Hall of Fame. They're really popular classical music pieces, plus lots of symphonies and some gorgeous songs. But I want to focus on Mendelssohn's teenage years. It's fair to say that he had a lot going for him when he was growing up. He was born into a prominent intellectual family in Germany. His grandfather was called Moses Mendelssohn. He was the leading Jewish philosopher of the Enlightenment. As well as being clever, his family, Mendelssohn's family, were also really rich. His mother and father's families were also bankers. He had a sister, Fanny, to whom he was absolutely devoted. And like him, she was prodigiously talented musically, a child prodigy. I hope we'll have more of her in another podcast because she's a really significant figure. He was also brilliant at painting. He was an athlete. He published a translation in German of the Roman author Terence when he was 16. And when he was growing up, the house in Berlin is full of intellectuals and the great people of the day. So, for example, when he's a kid, Germany's most important cultural figure, Goethe, came round when he was 12, when Mendelssohn was 12, and Goethe was a very old man. So Goethe, when he was a younger man, had heard the very young Mozart, and he said that Mendelssohn was more talented, more mature as an artist than Mozart was as a child. Mendelssohn, with his privileged life, he went on to travel widely. He came to the UK, famously to Scotland. That's where the Fingal's Cave came in the Scottish Symphony. And later in life, he became friends with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. He also conducted. And apparently on top of all that, he had a sunny disposition and he was good company and a thoroughly nice bloke. So I think, don't you by this stage, Linton, just hate him.
I can't stand people who have all those positive accolades to their name.
Well, seriously, lots of people did, if not hate him, they were very sceptical about him. Wagner.
Why sceptical?
Well,
musically.
Well, there were, even in modern times, critics have written that his music was, conservative, perhaps a bit saccharine. Well, if you're going to judge him on Hark the Herald Angels Sing, which is, a jolly good tune, as they might say, but it's a certain kind of, Victoriana.
But hey, look, it's survived the ages, hasn't it?
It absolutely has. But there were sort of more serious things. After his death, Wagner wrote anti-Semitic things about him and his music. His music was banned by the Nazis. His violin concerto, for example, was just taken off programs, and that was a very, very popular piece of music. And that certainly doesn't apply to the music that he wrote when he was a precocious teenager, which includes, in fact, some of his most famous music.
So we've heard about these many, many pieces that he's written that are still played today, but what's the piece that you've chosen?
Well, it's from 1825, Mendelssohn 16, exactly 200 years from when we're talking now. And this piece is a bit different from a lot of the music that's been written by other composers around that time. String quartets were the norm, 2 violins, a viola and a cello, and Mendelssohn himself was to write loads of these. But in this piece, it's called octet, a string octet, and he's kind of doubling up the string quartet. He's putting one string quartet and adding another. And it's, in fact, the first significant piece in this form. So in that sense, the 16-year-old Mendelssohn is a bit of a pioneer. He's innovating even at this stage.
Interestingly, we don't see a lot of pieces in that form, do we, in that instrumentation? Because now, generally, if we're talking about octets, they tend to be a combination of strings and possibly woodwind.
Like the Schubert octet, for example, and other pieces that have come since then. I like to kind of imagine the scene. 200 years ago, it's 1825 in the Mendelssohn Salon in their big posh house in Berlin. And the musicians sit down, all 8 of them, and this is the sound you get. That was Mendelssohn's Octet in E-flat, played by quite a few musicians: Andrew Wan, Augustine Heilich, Cynthia Phelps, Edward Aaron, Erin Keefe, James Ennis, Richard O'Neill and Robert Demain.
It is a really exciting opening, isn't it?
I know, and for me it's just some of the most joyful music ever written. It's being young, gifted and happy, and Felix Mendelssohn with all of life before you at the age of 16 and just able to do that. And I mean, it's interesting to think about what is the music actually doing. I mean, that's the mood. That's what it makes me feel. And, you know, you probably looked at me and thought I'd gone a bit crazy when we were saying that, because I'm throwing my arms out, like embracing the whole world, I love you sort of thing. But I really have to contain myself in the concert hall, honestly, because I do sometimes get told off when I'm hearing music that I really love, that I kind of move around a bit. But that music really does make me feel happy. It makes me smile. It's got this huge generosity and warmth about it. And it's interesting to think about what actually technically is the music actually doing. Why does it make me feel that? And I don't know what you think, but for me it's like the warmth of that big string sound. You know, it's like a blaze of sunshine. It's doubling up the string sound of a string quartet. It's also the kind of upward energy of the music, those phrases that just da 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 da, then let's go higher, da da da, then
but
let's go higher to the top of the phrase.
They explode at the top as well, don't they? Like a firework.
Exactly. It's like a blaze of sunshine. Or like a sort of starburst, getting higher and higher. And then at the end of that extract that we just heard, it just seems like the whole ensemble of string players seems to be laughing, that, you know, that sort of staccato stuff. Can we, maybe just play that extract again so that we can talk through it a second time? Should we try that? Yes, up higher. Then, bursting out over the top. And then we go higher still. We start higher, and then we get higher again. Then the big burst. Exultant. It's like spinning round. This is the laughing.
I can definitely see why that brings you so much joy. Is
it not doing it for you, Linton?
No, I love it. I think it's a great piece. I think it's a really, really brilliant piece. It makes me, because I think often when I have to be really careful when I'm enjoying a piece of music that I'm playing, because I then get too tense and excited, and it can affect my technique.
So you're sitting there pretending you're playing at the moment and thinking I mustn't get too out of control.
Well, it makes me go to that place where I can feel it bubbling up. It feels like a boiling cauldron of hot water, and I can feel myself kind of getting ready to get really excited about it. There is an unbounding positivity to this.
Let's just hear what the music does just a little bit later. It's kind of the same music, but he starts playing with it, bringing in new instrumental colours, and there's lots of ducking and diving in the music just because he knows how to do it. I recently saw dolphins playing off the west coast of Scotland, and this image came into my head when I was listening to this music the other day. You can sort of feel how pleased for himself he is, but for me it's impossible not to join in.
So, like, even though we're going into the minor key, there still seems, you kind of know there's going to be a happy ending. It kind of feels heroic to me. Yeah. Like, you know, you're on a quest with a mighty hero, and you know that this little dark bit of music is just a part of a story that's going to end happily. So if we think about a major key, that's the happy sound.
On my trusty keyboard.
On the trusty Casio. And then if we think about a minor key, that's when you hear music that sounds slightly sad. And most music that you hear that's either happy or sad will be in a major or minor key.
The third movement takes us into that idea that music can be happy, even if it's in the minor key. And we also get a kind of signature sound of Mendelssohn. This is the first time we hear it. This is a kind of music that he was to use in several other pieces. Some people refer to it as Mendelssohn fairy music, because the really famous example is in his music for A Midsummer Night's Dream, his incidental music for the Shakespeare play, and it's music for actual fairies. So let's hear the Midsummer Night's Dream music. Mendelssohn's A Midsummer Night's Dream, the incidental music, conducted by Sergio Ozawa with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. It's that light, dancing kind of gossamer thing, and even though it's in the minor key, you get the sense of just...
It's the textures and the timbres that he uses, I think, is that's what makes this so special, because you can put some of those sounds on other instruments and it wouldn't quite have the same effect as the almost pecking staccato sound that you get on the woodwinds playing that quickly.
And yet, let's go back to the octet, which is just string instruments, and I feel, which is the sort of prototype for that Midsummer Night's Dream music. And I think he gets that kind of sparkle just using the string instruments. Let's hear it. This is the kind of introduction.
It makes me think of, you know, you were saying laughing at the beginning. That's what it makes me feel like, chuckling, laugh. And I love how he transitions from one feeling into another really seamlessly, from one type of smooth music to a little bit more jagged or the other way around.
This 16-year-old knew what he was doing.
Yeah. I think the fact that he was 16 as well comes through in the music quite a lot. There is, and when I say this, I don't mean it in a negative way. There's a naivety about it, which is really endearing.
Yeah, there's a naivety about it, but there's also this sort of absolute assurance, sort of almost emotional assurance. We're not going to hear the slow movement because that is more dark and more serious, and we're here to talk about joy. But that, again, that takes us on this sort of emotional journey in a way that is really beyond his years. And, you know, no shade to Mozart at all, who was obviously a phenomenal genius, but I can't think of a piece that he wrote when he was 16 that's absolutely still a major piece.
I am so offended by that.
Oh, come on then.
The Mozart Bassoon Concerto.
Oh no.
It's core repertoire. Oh. He wrote that when he was 6. How dare you, Gillian?
Concerto. Oh gosh. Oh. How can, we can't be friends anymore because I have to tell you, it's not on the top of my list of core Mozart pieces that I listen to all the time.
How dare you? How dare you?
I didn't know that. I didn't wish to offend you. But for all this joy and effervescent happiness, life wasn't always a bed of roses for Felix. His father, unlike his proudly Jewish grandfather, felt that the family had to assimilate in a climate where anti-Semitism was just normal and regarded as a legitimate point of view, including among intellectuals. So when he was 7, Felix's father insisted that the family convert to Christianity because their chances would be better. And when he was 38, his beloved sister Fanny died. He was heartbroken and he died just 6 months later. So Felix Mendelssohn never reached the age of 40. But let's hear the finale of the 16-year-old with everything in front of him, full of joy and adrenaline and more laughter and swagger.
There's a really sweet spot for me as a musician. I don't know if it's the same for you. There's music that's great to listen to and there's music that's great to play. But you can immediately tell when a piece is great for a musician to play and to listen to. And this feels like it sits so nicely in that spot because there's a lot of joy coming through in the playing itself.
Exactly. And this is a great performance of it. So, Linton, did you feel the joy of Mendelssohn's Octet?
I mean, it was hard not to, Gillian.
It is infectious, isn't it?
Indeed, it is. Gillian, I really enjoyed listening to that. I know the octet, but I've never listened to it as closely as that. And it is certainly a joyful piece. And I'm going to share my joyful piece with you now, if that's okay. It's by a composer, Italian Baroque composer called Francesca Caccini. Are you familiar with her?
No, that is a name new to me. And that's the wonderful thing about this podcast, because both of us are finding out new things, aren't we?
Indeed. Well, she is, I found this piece because I used to present another podcast and very often I would try and have a gender balance because I would send a playlist to people and we talk about it and I would always try and have a gender balance. So I spent a lot of time researching women composers and finding recordings that I could send to people to talk about. And Francesca Caccini came up and it was like a treasure trove. I suddenly realized that there are actually loads and loads of women Baroque composers because of the societal structure back then and how women in Italy were encouraged to compose. Especially we find a lot of composers who lived in convents where the arts were very much encouraged amongst nuns. So Francesca Caccini, let me tell you a little bit about her. She was born in 1587 in Florence. She died sometime after 1641. We don't know exactly when because she disappears basically from any kind of public record. So it could have been 1641 or she could have lived another, 20 years after that. And she was an Italian composer and singer who was one of a handful of women in the 17th century. Actually, very few women who actually had their compositions published. It was because she was employed in the Medici court in Florence. She was actually at one point one of the highest paid musicians in the Medici court. So that afforded her quite a lot of privilege.
So that idea of a woman making a living from writing music, I mean, it's not something that, because we think of women as domestic composers essentially, but that's not something that I had imagined was happening.
Well, I think it was certainly happening, maybe not a lot, but it was certainly happening in Italy. And it sounds like the societal structures were, don't get me wrong, I don't think they were entirely free of patriarchy, but the societal structures back then were slightly different in that there were ways in which women could become successful as musicians and could make a living as a musician as well. So the piece I've chosen is a chaconne. Now a chaconne is usually back then was a piece for solo voice and basso continuo bass line, which would have been played by the likes of usually a plucked string instrument like a lute or a theorbo. and possibly maybe a cello or a viola da gamba on the bottom, which are all the bowed string instruments. And it's a Baroque form that's characterized by this repeating bass line with kind of variations on top.
You kind of call it a riff, wouldn't you? In
Yeah,
sort of pop music
I think
or
we
jazz.
would
Yeah,
these
it's like
days.
a repeating bass line.
And as the years have gone on as well, the idea of what a chaconne has evolved. So, there aren't many different forms, but the form of chaconne is different nowadays. But that's what it originally was. And the piece I've chosen is an arrangement, probably of what would have been one of her songs from that songbook. So should we have a little listen to the opening? I want to see if it brings you the same amount of joy that it brings me. That was the Chaconne by Francesca Caccini. It was performed by the musicians of Cappella di Santi Maria degli Angiolini, and the arranger was Gianluca Lastraioli.
I love that. I love the sound of it for a start, which is obviously a choice of the performers, because I presume when it was written down, was the instrumentation actually decided? Was it sort of specified?
Well, actually, it's only kind of... In the Baroque period, very often instrumentation wasn't specified. So very often it was written for whatever was available, which is usually kind of bass lines and melody lines. Interestingly, the interesting thing about Francesca Caccini is that she was very specific about what she wanted. And one of the things that is a characteristic that is very present in her music is there's a lot of melisma. So she wrote melodies that would very tightly go with the words that singers were singing. When she wrote the music, it was full of purpose and intent of exactly what she wanted.
That's really interesting you say that about the melody, because the melody of what you just played, for me, is the second element that really gives me that sense, that really uplifting sense. And I think it's because it feels very free. It feels a bit improvised. It feels as if somebody could be just thinking of it, and another thing, and another thing, and another thing. It's definitely very structured. It's got a great shape to it, but it's got this freedom about it. As if it is improvised, but it can't have been improvised. It was all written down.
Well, a lot of it was written down. I don't know how much interpretive freedom they've made in this particular recording, but very often with the chaconne, it would be a melody and variations. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was very thoroughly notated. But it is that element of explosiveness, and almost it harkens back to folk music. Yeah. This idea of and the settings in which folk music would have been played and made.
Well, I think the beauty of the chaconne form in terms of this theme of joy is the idea that in this case, you've got this repeating structure, the repeating bass line, in this case a pattern on the guitar or lute, and each time it comes round, the melody instrument, the violin, is elaborating and making it more complicated and more daring and yet more fun, and adding trills and leaps and jumps, and it's so joyful the way that's done.
Well, on that note, actually, let's hear a little bit of how that variation starts to evolve. So you can hear here, we've just got a lot more notes as well. So it certainly follows the melodic pattern of the original theme, but there's just more to it.
And as a listener, you're just smiling, and as the violinist seems to be going, and I can do this as well, and then I can do this. And it just makes me laugh. It's lovely.
And then we come to this section where it speaks to what we were talking about before about moving into the minor section. We come to this section where, again, we very clearly hear the original melody, but we've moved into a minor key.
Ooh. That's very early Baroque, sort of that almost jazzy chromatic music.
There's a lot of chromaticism in this, and actually, I'll recount a story I remember. I remember when I was at music college. I'm very firmly, my favourite era is the Romantic era, when music started to be more expressive. And I'd always said I'm not the biggest fan of Baroque music. And I remember going to a concert. It was by Manchester Camerata, and I can't for the life of me now remember what the repertoire was, but it was full of chromaticism, that kind of chromaticism. And I remember
Do we need to explain what we mean by chromaticism?
Yes. So
go on then, Linton.
Now, what sometimes happens is that a composer will move away from the 8 notes that are in a major or minor key, and we'll get this chromatic sound, so the notes that are closest together on the piano. So that's what all those funny notes in that bit of music that we just heard are. They're chromatic notes, and when it kind of slides down and it feels like it's that's the composer using a lot of chromaticism.
And that thing of it, major being happy and minor being sad, I mean, it is kind of all in the mind. And we have actually shown with the Mendelssohn that you can have really uplifting music in a minor key.
I always wonder, is it that the music is happy, or is it that we've come to associate happiness with this sound? Which came first, the major scale and the feeling of happy, or happiness being associated with the major scale?
Another podcast.
another podcast, another time. But anyway, so that's a really... I was so surprised about how much chromaticism was in this Baroque piece, and apparently it was rife. Certain composers were exploring chromaticism in the Baroque era when there were quite strict rules about what they could and couldn't do in terms of kind of major and minor sounds. But I just think as well it adds to that element of spontaneity, and I still think there is the reason I still find it happy is because there's still so much energy in, even when we move into the minor key as well. Then you get this return to the major key again, which I think it's a triumphant return of the major. I love that crunchy, yeah. And what do you get to go back in? Yeah. A nice little major scale.
It's like a peal of bells, that major scale. It is like a peal of bells. We haven't mentioned more chromatic naughtiness.
Now, this is where it gets really sinuous, and I love this. All of this really crunchy chromatics. And then at the end, you're suddenly presented with what feels like a bit of a violin recitative. It's like, I've done all my showing off, and this is my final bow. Mm-hmm. Chaconne by Francesca Caccini. It was performed by musicians of Cappella di Santa Maria degli Angiolini, and Gianluca Lastraioli was the arranger.
I mean, of course, so much of the joy of this is in the performance as well as the music, and the way, I think the way these performers tackle the rhythm of the piece and have the violinist with that freedom in the melodic line, but yet this sort of really expressive leaning into all those chromatic notes. It's a brilliant performance, isn't it?
It is, and I think it really translates when a performer is enjoying themselves. In fact, I remember doing my final recital in music college, and I remember thinking to myself before I went on stage, whatever happens, I'm just going to convey that I did love the piece. I think it was a piece of Arnold Bach's that I was playing. And I remember just thinking, I need to convey. I wasn't like, I need to get it perfect. I need to do this. I need to do that. I was like, I need to convey how much I enjoy playing this piece. And I ended up getting a first for it.
Of course you did.
But I've always remembered that if I can translate how much I'm enjoying a piece, then I've done the job that I need to do as a musician. I think additionally with this though, we've talked a lot about how music makes us feel. There is a lot of science and a lot that science doesn't understand about why music makes us happy. And I think in this instance, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say that there's something about the regularity and the familiarity of this repeating bass line. So we know almost what to expect in terms of harmony. And I think sometimes wandering harmony or harmony that's unexpected or has to be filled in by a listener is why some people find classical music hard to access sometimes. And I think there's an element of the familiarity in the repeating bass line that makes this super accessible for me.
Well, thanks for putting a smile on my face with music I've never heard before. That was just Francesca Caccini. I'm going to go right home and find all the music. Put her on my playlist. That was just brilliant. Thank you.
The interesting thing for me about thinking about joy in classical music is, and I'm glad we didn't go there too much, there's a lot of science around what classical music can do. I think it's super interesting, unlike other things that bring us joy, like, say, food or sex, or even things that visual that stimulate us. There's usually some kind of payoff. So I'm thinking, like, in a film, if we have an emotional response, it's usually because there's things that we relate to. And often that is the case in music, but science has never quite figured out what it is that triggers all of that stuff in us. And I remember having a conversation, it was with Siobhan McSweeney actually, and we were talking about a piece that I'd sent her on the podcast. And she said, very often it's easy to describe what you don't like about something, but it's quite hard to describe what it is you do like about something, unless there's something specific that it reminds you of. But she said to me, ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's just that it brings you joy, and cling on to that, because, if something brings you joy, that's a really precious thing in life.
I mean, I think there are specific things for me that do work. I think rhythm, obviously, that sort of somehow chimes with either your heartbeat or the way you want to move, or a dancing beat. That's one thing. There's also, I don't know, for me, this is hard to explain, but it's sort of daringness. It's something that makes me go, you actually dared to do that in music.
But you get an immediate payoff as well, don't
and
you,
I got that
music?
with the Caccini, those sort of cheeky, chromatic, slidey bits, and also in the Mendelssohn, just the cleverness of the way the music darted about in and out of itself. And it almost sort of took pleasure in being able to be daring. So that really brings me joy. I think there's also things like, whether a phrase goes up or down. It doesn't necessarily follow that a phrase goes down, it's not happy, because we just had that kind of pealing of bells, but it's because it made me think of a pealing of bells at the end of the Caccini there. So there's obviously associations as well. But yeah, probably at the end of the day, we're going to come to the rather obvious conclusion that we don't know quite what it is, because music is the most abstract form that there is. It's the most abstract art form that there is. There is no literal meaning to certainly instrumental music if it doesn't have words attached to it. So it's just the most wonderful thing of pure pleasure. Well, we've both been smiling a lot here in the studio, so I hope our music has brought you as much joy as it's brought us. Thanks for listening. So, Hear Me Out is brought to you by the wonderful people at the Southbank Centre.
And produced by the brilliant team at Reduced Listening.
Thanks for spending time with us. If you like this episode, please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe share it with a friend.
We love exploring big ideas through music, and we've got plenty more to come.
So join us next time for another adventure. Until then, keep listening, keep questioning,
and keep letting music surprise you. See you next time.